Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon from New York City. It is wonderful to see so many people from all over the world in the chat for today's webinar. We will be gazing into the crystal ball of the future and navigating consumer trends that are shaping 2025. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping rules. This webinar will be recorded and you will receive it in your email in a couple of days. Please do keep an active chat in your sidebar as we go through. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions. We will have time at the end for some Q&A, so please drop any burning questions into the Q&A section of the tab as well. I am your host, Sharon Pinello. I am the head of the 427 Innovation Lab here at Braze, where creativity meets technology. And I am so thrilled to introduce Vicki Loomes, who is the head of trends at Trendwatching. She has delivered so many consumer trend keynotes, webinars, workshops, and trend safaris in over 30 cities all around the world, including presentations for MasterCard, PayPal, Bank of America, and she brings so much insight into what's happening with culture and consumers across a range of industries. So in terms of innovation, we're all in for a treat, and I'm really happy to introduce Vicki and get this show started. Welcome, Vicki.
Hello, thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, and great to see so many people here. My accent probably gives me away, but yes, I am from the UK, I live in London. And so I'm really excited to be here to present some trends to you. We want to keep the session as interactive as we can, so I thought it would be really nice to start with a poll. It's kind of a temperature taking poll, and it's a little question about something we will talk about a lot today, AI. So which AI capability are you most excited to explore in 2025? Is it personalization, creative tasks, data analysis, customer service, or another mysterious answer? If it's a mysterious answer, do put that in the chat because we would love to know. What didn't I think of when I put the poll together? This is obviously, something that we're going to talk about a lot today. And so just a quick way to see what you are all thinking. So I see lots of votes for personalization. I see lots of votes for data analysis as well. I wasn't sure which one would win out of those two. Well, we're going to talk a lot about definitely personalization in the presentation. So hopefully there are a few trends here that will speak to you. I think it looks like we've got personalization as a clear winner. I don't think any of the others are going to catch up. So like I said, let's keep this presentation really interactive. Please leave your comments, leave your thoughts as we go through on the trends. We'll have another poll at the end, and then also time hopefully for questions if I don't talk for too long. So let's hope that doesn't happen. So let's get going with the presentation. I'm just going to share my screen. Cool. So thank you for joining and being part of this look into the future. As you heard, I work for a company called Trendwatching. And when I tell people that we track trends, I need to caveat that we don't have a crystal ball, of course. What we do have is a robust methodology that helps us understand trends. And spot trends. And I'm going to share that with you just very quickly before we get onto the trends, kind of to empower you to become trend watchers too. So our methodology starts here with the idea that the world is always changing. There are things like climate change, population change, social change, technological change. Of course, when it comes to technological change, that increasingly means AI. We know that every brand is rushing to integrate it into their offerings. The tech has reached this mainstream awareness with unprecedented speed. I'm sure you saw this data from OpenAI, just published last week, 300 million weekly active ChatGPT users. That's up from 200 million in August, 1 billion messages every day. And apparently over the next year, the company is aiming to quadruple that user number. So they're targeting 1 billion. And look, it's safe to say that AI is the ultimate hype train, particularly in the world of business, and maybe rightfully so. But today, as we talk about AI, I don't want to just talk about it for the sake of it. I just want to think about, what challenges is it solving? Because really that is how you can leverage it to set new customer expectations. So, look, our methodology starts with the idea that the world is always changing, but despite all of that change, we're still the same humans with the same human needs. Things like the desire for convenience, connection, fun, delight. When I say basic human needs, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you are definitely thinking along the right lines. Of course, we have added a few basic human needs over the last few years. But here's the thing, okay? When change, technological change or social change bumps up against those core human needs, it creates points of tension. And at Trendwatching, that's where we believe brands come in, because we believe that innovations have the potential to resolve this tension. So what we do is we look at products, services, business models, campaigns, experience, concepts that are coming into the market. And we ask ourselves, how are these innovations serving people's needs in new ways? And what new expectations are these innovations creating among consumers? And I think that is a great two questions for you to keep asking yourself as well. And of course, when it comes to innovation and businesses, I'm sure you are tracking, what your direct competitors are doing, but it is increasingly important to keep an eye on what is going on outside of your industries, because after all, consumers don't live in silos. They take the expectations that are created in one industry to every industry and every brand they interact with. We call this the expectation economy. So your direct competitors aren't just your direct competitors, it's almost every brand in the consumer arena. So just to kind of sum up the methodology, we have these three building blocks of trends, these basic needs, these macro trends, which are the ways the world is changing, and innovations. And when basic needs bump up against macro trends or change, tension is created. And the big challenge for me, and increasingly for you as well, is to look out for those new expectation gaps that are being made here and think about how you can start surpassing and then creating new consumer expectations yourself. And perhaps, if you only take one sentence away from this introduction, it's that consumer trends are just patterns of emerging expectations. And one final thing to say about expectations is just think of how quickly expectations have changed over the last 40 years. AI is only going to put that into overdrive. So let's move on to the trends. I have 4 trends I will share today, so we'll go quite rapidly through everything. But one thing to say is that, I could talk about trends all day. I promise I won't, but unless you kind of think about how to action them, all of this is just nice to know. So at the end of each trend, I have a light bulb moment, a couple of questions for you to think about, for you to, take away to your team, to your colleagues over the next few days and continue discussing. Okay, introduction over. Let's move on to the trends. And of course, we're going to start with AI. So AI-powered chatbots have been making plenty of headlines over the last 18 months. Klarna launched one of the probably more high-profile examples. It's powered by OpenAI. They claim that it handled 2/3 of customer service chats in the first month of launch. But of course, the technology that powers these types of services is only getting better. Deloitte predicts that in 2025, 25% of companies that use generative AI will launch agentic AI pilots or proof of concept, growing to 50% in 2027. Autonomous generative AI agents are essentially software solutions that can complete complex tasks and fulfill objectives with little or no human supervisions. And actually, tech companies are already showing us what is possible. Anthropic unveiled what they call its computer use model, which can essentially follow a user's commands and move a cursor around their screen, click on relevant things, and then input info into a virtual keyboard. It is really emulating the way that you use your own computer. And you can see how it works on the video a little bit. It uses a mixture of screenshots of the computer to interpret content, It can click buttons. It uses real-time access to the internet, and it's going to be available to developers to build specific applications. And one kind of nice quote from the chief product officer at Anthropic, who was in conversation with the Financial Times, he says that they want to automate the drudgery of life. So they're trying to automate all those boring tasks. And, this is actually just part of a broader industry push towards AI agents that can complete tasks on users' behalf. So last month, Bloomberg reported that OpenAI is preparing to launch a new AI agent, which has the code name Operator, which is a bit of a disappointing code name, if I'm honest. Not to be outdone, Google is developing an AI system codenamed Project Jarvis, a bit more interesting. Meanwhile, Microsoft just launched Copilot Vision, which can view and understand the context of what you're doing online to provide real-time assistance verbally. And this actually isn't just big tech. Twos is a to-do list app that TechCrunch recently reported on. When you add a task, it can suggest actions that might be relevant. So adding a link to a site to buy your toilet paper, for example. So if we put all of this together, we get to our first trend, which is AI genies. And so this is all about next generation digital assistants that offer shortcuts across the customer journey, really guiding consumers, helping them take, little shortcuts along the way. And of course, something to note here is that many consumers will be looking for autonomy over what they outsource. So choice autonomy will probably be a really important component here. So let's look at some consumer-facing AI genies. Perplexity is an AI search engine. Perhaps you might have heard of them, you might have used them. They recently, just last month, rolled out something called a Buy with Pro feature. Essentially, it's an assistant that combines conversational prompts and image inputs to help users research products, compare reviews, and access information. They have something called Snap to Shop, that was well timed, which lets people find products by uploading a photo. But perhaps the most important or interesting thing is that it can check out on your behalf. So if you decide that, you found the product that you want to buy, it can essentially then go and buy it for you. Now, I wasn't actually able to test this myself. I don't think it's available yet in the UK. And I hear there are maybe a few teething problems with it, but it really shows the direction of travel. And actually, speaking of travel, which is a pun I didn't intend to do, Priceline are a travel company who have integrated their chatbot, which is named Penny, with the latest voice tech from OpenAI. So this means that you can now interact with Penny by typing, but also by speaking. So if you're looking for a hotel, you don't have to type in your search requirements. You can do it via voice. It's only available for hotels at the moment, but they're trying to, reading some of the kind of comments from the brand, they are really looking to make booking travel as simple as having a conversation. And their long-term vision is for an AI agent that can accompany travelers throughout an entire trip. Whether or not that is text, voice, or a combination of both kind of remains to be seen. And we're starting to get to this point where maybe we might have omnipresent AI genies. One of the big tech companies that I didn't yet talk about that is playing in this space is called Meta. They have a prototype of these Orion AR glasses. So they essentially, put this digital layer on the world around you once you put them on. They can be controlled by eye and hand tracking. It seems like they're going to sync with a sort of wearable that you have on your wrist. But one of the most interesting things is that Meta's AI personal assistant will run through the glasses. So this means it will be able to recognize objects in the user's surroundings and then kind of execute tasks based on visual or voice input. So for example, if you open your fridge or you open your kitchen cupboard and you get fridge blindness or cupboard blindness and you're not sure what to do with the ingredients that are there, it can identify them and suggest a recipe. You do still have to do the cooking and the preparing, which is perhaps the unfortunate part. And we're fast also approaching this point where it's not just about assistance, but these AI genies can also provide a certain level of companionship. So here is an AI genie that is both entertaining and is starting to fulfill a role that is a little bit like a companion. So I'm going to let the video do the explaining here. This is definitely the cutest video you will see all day, maybe all week.
ここにいるからね。こっちだよ。ご機嫌だね、シュリちゃんね。
ないない。ばあ、すごいすごい、ルリちゃん。シャボン玉飛んだ。
いいね、いいね。
友達いないいないはしてくれた。かわいいね、おんくんそれ。
Okay, hopefully we all got the gist of that, but yes, these robot companions can entertain kids whilst you are driving the car. I should say that there is no current launch date for this, so jury's out on whether we'll actually be able to entertain our kids with these cute little robots, but it's definitely a nice idea. And just one final innovation to share with you on this trend. Some companions can also come with a commerce angle. So Norway's Sport AI have developed AI-powered models that can analyze golf or tennis players' technique and then offer personalized feedback. Now, two things here. One, it makes advice that is typically reserved for elite athletes more widely available, but there could also be, the creators say, a commerce angle here. So for example, the system could suggest products that are best suited to the player's style, for example. So it's a really kind of interesting way to think about that intersection of companion and commerce. So our first light bulb moment: when would your consumers appreciate intuitive assistants that help them discover, consider, purchase, and more? Okay, one trend down, we've got 3 to go. Let's now turn our attention to blanding. If you're not familiar with this word, don't worry. It's basically the idea that from interiors to cars, to brand logos, to coffee shops, to hotels, somehow everything looks the same. It is a phenomenon that is also referred to as the age of average. And this is something that is happening in entertainment as well. So in music, for example, songs are becoming shorter. Basically, they are being written there is this formula that works for streaming, and a lot of songs are now being optimized to that standard. And in response, consumers are pushing back and are hacking entertainment and music to suit their needs. So one example of that is how Gen Z is creating their own sounds and remixes for TikTok. But this is actually happening across entertainment. And so let me just play another video that will help put that into context a little bit more.
A crown forged from the wild sea. A throne carved from untamed land. For every decision, a shadow. Our choices define us. How will you rule Finland?
Definitely gets the prize for the most dramatic video of the week. And look, you probably noticed that video was basically AI generated content, and it all exists on Dreamflare, which is a streaming platform for generative AI content exclusively. One of the interesting things that you can do on this platform is that for some of the content, you can make decisions about how a story progresses, and you can also choose the point of view you want to take. So for instance, in that one you just saw there, you can choose between being a king or a magician, for instance. If you're as old as me, you might remember those choose your own adventure books, which allowed you to turn to specific pages to kind of control the story. This basically takes that to a whole new level. And, we've kind of established now that consumers can be, music curators, they can be movie directors. Maybe that begs the question, could they do your job too? And they say yes. And, right at the start, we learned that you're not just competing with brands from within your industry, but from best-in-class brands, regardless of the sector. But now there's this additional player that is entering the business arena, and it is your own consumers. Because essentially, tomorrow's budding entrepreneurs, they aren't just sort of side hustlers. They are now becoming single-person corporations supported by agentic AI assistants of the type we talked about in the first trend that they can generate themselves. And they potentially could be launching the billion-dollar enterprises of tomorrow. And so there is a real opportunity for brands to think about how they can collaborate with this next generation of consumer creators. So let's take a look at a few innovations. One brand that has always been hyper customizable, thanks to those like gibbets charms that you can fit onto the shoe, is Crocs. But the brand recently took things one step further with what they call the Mad Lab. And so the idea was that you answered a series of interactive questions to develop your own bits. They deliberately made that hard to say for trend analysts, I think. And then you answered these questions and it created an AI generated charms. So there was all sorts of design options possible. You could then collect other people's creations. You could vote on your favorites. You could earn badges, and so on. Now, where it stopped was you couldn't then, for example, order your customized bits. They just kind of existed in a digital form. But I think we are fast approaching that stage. Arcade is a generative AI marketplace where, to borrow from their tagline, what can be dreamed can be made. So this launched very recently, initially with jewelry. They say they're going to expand to other product categories. What do? You basically can create a product with a typed text prompt, and then it creates an image of the product for you. It creates, the price that it might cost to produce it, the materials, the dimensions, all generated using Arcade's AI technologies. Those designs can then be purchased and made by an artisan, a brand, or a manufacturer, someone in Arcade's global marketplace. And you can also promote your creations and earn a percentage of every sale if other people buy them. So perhaps there is an opportunity for consumer creators to be your next target group. That could mean, helping creators create content. So video editing app Captions have launched an AI edit feature that automatically adds custom graphics, zooms, music, sound effects, and transitions to videos. But actually, you don't even need to have any raw footage. It gives you now the ability to completely auto-generate short kind of social media style videos. They have preset avatars. You just need to, again, similar to Arcade, just type in a prompt. And their most recent launch is something called Social Studio. This really lets AI run your social media accounts. So it can do things like plan your content calendar, generate videos when you need them, and so on. But there is also, an opportunity to think about helping creators elevate creativity within its own right. So this is a slightly different kind of take on this trend. It's a fairly new startup called Exactly AI. They're based in London, and they allow artists to train AI models on their artwork. So it creates algorithms that generate images in an artist's unique style. The idea is that then this allows artists to scale, sell, license fairly high quality digital work, and then they keep ownership. They're able to kind of scale up output and obviously hopefully scale up their income too. So they raised a big funding round in May, apparently have around 40,000 registered users. So lots and lots of interesting ways to think about supporting the creator economy and sort of co-creating with consumers. And, obviously the creator economy, the market size continues to grow, could reach up to $500 billion by 2027, according to Goldman Sachs. And Sam Altman is on record as predicting that we're fast approaching the first 1 billion, or the first one-person billion-dollar company. So the first one-person unicorn, essentially. So my questions here are, what is the role of brands in an era of DIY content creation? And how will you convert consumer competitors into co-creators? So we have covered AI agents, the consequences of blending and co-creation. Now onto neuroaesthetics. If you are not familiar with this term, here's a handy definition. It is the scientific study of the neural consequences of contemplating a creative work of art. In other words, how art measurably changes the body, brain, and behavior. So what happens to you when you look at art? Why is this important? Well, there is a growing body of research that suggests that art experiences can help do things like reduce cortisol levels, show cognitive decline, and more. And we're also seeing social prescribing, which is the idea that maybe you are prescribed spending time in nature or attending a pottery class instead of medication. That is gaining traction, helping to cement the idea that visiting a gallery isn't just something you do for entertainment, but it can be a form of therapy. But with just 18% of Americans visiting a cultural institution in the last 3 years, many more people could be benefiting from the effects of from the healing effects, I should say, of sensory immersion. Artists are also starting to push at the boundaries of digital art experiences. So at the London Design Festival, a art collective called Moza launched something called Resonance. It was an installation, a physical installation that you could go and visit, that used a combination of wearable tech and generative AI to create these unique thought signatures. So it meant that every visitor crafted their own artwork based on things like their brain activity and how they responded to light and sound within the exhibition. And then as you left, you were kind of presented with a recording, a digital recording, you weren't physically presented with it, that went into an online archive of resonances, each one completely unique. Meanwhile, mind reading technology is starting to move out of the lab and closer to reality. So Neurable are a company based in Boston. They have created a pair of headphones that is now available to buy that contain EEG. This allows the headphones to measure electrical activity in the brain. And then via an app, you can track that activity and it translates it into usable information for the wearer. They say it's a little bit like a Fitbit for your brain, and it could do things like detect burnout, fatigue, and all sorts of other kind of issues. Now, Gartner recently released a kind of big end of year report with lots of predictions for the coming years. And in that, they said that 60% of IT workers will be using things like bidirectional brain-machine interfaces by 2030. And, this isn't really just about productivity gains. It's about getting more insights about ourselves, having more self-knowledge. And, look, we know that people are interested in personalization. Here's some research from Deloitte that supports that. The same study also found that, 3 in 4 consumers are more likely to purchase from brands that deliver personalized experience. They spend more with those brands. So technological innovation is essentially driving the emergence of immersive, sensory-focused experiences that can be tailored to the participants' emotional cues and physical responses. But then the next step is really giving people the opportunity to learn something about themselves too. So it's really about bridging the gap between data and discovery, not just, sensory experiences that monitor internal states, but provide deeper self-knowledge. So let's look at a few innovations here. Providing deeper insights into the self, offering this kind of inner journey. So first up, we have Turkish Airlines. So they partnered with an artist called Refik Anadol. Refik Anadol is is mostly known for kind of digital AI-powered artwork. So they collaborated with him on a project called Inner Portrait. So to create these 4 works, Anadol sent 4 people who had never traveled abroad before to new destinations using sensors to capture emotional data, things like heart rate, skin conduction, EEG outputs, them again. And then that information was then translated into virtual immersive experiences and kind of virtual artworks. Now, a couple of things to note here is that, if you have a product or a service that is hard to quantify the benefits of, like travel, for example, this is a really interesting way to think about doing that. And secondly, we know that people love learning more about themselves. Look at the ongoing success of Spotify Wrapped. Giving people more insights into themselves is always going to be something powerful, particularly if it's an insight that they can then act on. Just a caveat that, this year's Spotify Wrapped, there were a few grumblings, a few complaints, a little bit of one of the common themes that came through was there was too much focus on AI features. Seemed like people didn't really like the AI generated podcasts and these very fact-based things that were added this year, and preferred audio auras and things from other years. So, there's definitely obviously like that balance to consider here. This innovation blurs the lines between science, art, and nostalgia. So it was a campaign called Mindography from Instax, which is of course owned by Fujifilm, and it used a combination of AI and neuroscience to recreate lost digital memories. Now, I am obviously not a scientist, so I'm not, probably the best person to explain how this worked, but basically they worked with someone, a doctor, a professor from the Princeton Neuroscience Institute to reconstruct memories of a participant. So they did things like took MRI scans, mapping brain activity as the participant visualized certain memories. And then AI algorithms generated images based on that brain activity. And then those images were shown at an exhibition in Sydney, which coincided with Fujifilm Australia's 20th anniversary. Okay, step 2, dream states. Lucid dreaming and just dreaming in general has, always captured people's imagination and attention. So this is a playful experience that promises to take guests on a lucid dreaming journey. Now, they don't actually promise, because I don't think you can definitely create a state for lucid dreaming, but it tried its very best too. So the Kimpton Hotels in London partnered with a lucid dream expert and an AI artist to create this package to create these ideal conditions for lucid dreaming. So you get things like a pillow mist, it's a herbal tincture as well, but the main thing is a VR headset that is loaded with immersive imagery. And the idea is that as you watch this, it kind of triggers something in your subconsciousness, which is more likely to create a lucid dreaming state. Now, does it really work? Jury's out. If you do happen to lucid dream and you record your dream, the artist who created the VR artwork will also create a personalized artwork for you. Perhaps, a little gimmicky, but definitely an interesting kind of playful way to give people more insights into themselves. And the third and final step is transcendence. Can you get that in a retail space? Nike gave it a shot and imagined, or reimagined, I should say, their Paris House of Innovation, combining physical and sensory aspects. So the centerpiece is this kind of pink sphere that you can see in the middle of the retail space on the screen. That is called the Breath Lab. And the idea is that as you enter it, you engage in guided breathwork exercises, and then that changes the color and the ambient conditions, essentially creating this personalized aura. That interaction is enabled by an AI model, of course, which processes breath-related data and a thermal camera. And taking this really even further is the submersive spa. Now, this is slated to open in the US in 2026. It's billed as an immersive art bathhouse. Now, there's not that many details about it at the moment, but it seems like it will combine classical spa therapies with art, AI, tech, and multimedia. And it seems like it's going to go way beyond relaxation into things like elevated states of consciousness, like awe, wonder, euphoria. So definitely something interesting to keep an eye on. So how is technology changing the type of experiences your consumers expect? Can you deliver hyper-personalized experiences that also offer new routes to enlightenment? Okay, I hope you are all still with me, because we are on to our fourth and final trend. And actually, I would be interested for you to kind of discuss amongst yourselves if you agree with this stat. According to research from Spotify, 80% of US Gen Z say niche and underground culture is going mainstream. It's a very similar story in the UK, in Australia. In fact, in all of the markets they surveyed, the number was remarkably similar. And one of the things they suggested for this thinking is that basically it's just there's this relentless pace of online culture is driving this niche to mainstream transition. So do you agree? I would be very interested to kind of hear all of your thoughts. One example of that niche to mainstream shift is Jules LeBron. So a week after the creator's very demure, very mindful TikTok went viral, it has now over, I think, 54 million plays on TikTok. That's what you can see playing on the screen. That was the original one. So that went viral. And just a week after it went viral, user-generated demure playlists were up by 2,500% on Spotify. Demure also later became Dictionary.com's word of the year. Some people are now working to protect their culture. In London, for example, locals who were fed up with too many tourists at their favorite hidden gems, I promise we're not all super unfriendly, everyone, started writing fake reviews about this very average restaurant in a very tourist hotspot, hoping that this would push it up the rankings. So the idea is that when people search for the best steakhouse in London, AI-powered search engines generate results for this place and not the local favorite, because they want to keep them to themselves, which is, very sneaky London behavior. But, I think it's 70% of Gen Z and millennial travelers rely on social media to get trip ideas. So people just want to protect their culture. And the lesson here is really that AI is making life in some ways more curated and more predictable. And as that happens, offsetting with serendipity and authenticity will be key. So consumers will appreciate brands, products, services with predictive capabilities, and that do offer a level of optimization, but they will also sometimes seek relief from this, optimized reality by looking for more spontaneity and serendipity. So sometimes this could be the more disruptive side. And that really is the core of the idea, our fourth and final trend, serendipity seekers. So we see AI getting better at personalizing and optimizing, and this pushback against algorithmic certainty, this quest for serendipity, spontaneity. And, you know, really this idea that people would like to bring a little bit more surprise back into their lives, creating an opportunity to build in unpredictability and sort of design for discovery. So Walkcast is built as a storytelling engine, and it is essentially an ever-changing infinite podcast that responds to the listener's location. So they have 3 AI agents that do this. So there is a curator that discovers the facts about the surroundings you are in, the editor that then turns these findings into a script, and then the AI host that delivers the story. The idea they really want to encourage is that maybe you think about walking down a street that you don't usually walk down, or you sort of walk more slowly and absorb the surroundings that you are in. So that is one kind of serendipity. This idea of being in the moment also links to this innovation from Heineken. So Heineken this year have been doing a lot of interesting things around encouraging people to get offline. You might remember they did something called a boring phone. It's essentially a dumb phone, like a non-smart phone. And then to kind of build on that, they rolled out what they call the boring mode phone app. So it silences apps and reduces notifications with the idea that you enjoy real world experiences undisturbed. So they promoted it at all sorts of festivals in Amsterdam and Mexico. One interesting thing they did was they used infrared technology to broadcast a message urging attendees to live in the moment and not in their phone. Those messages weren't actually visible to the naked eye, but they are visible through a camera lens. So if you were recording everything and, you know, enjoying the experience through your phone, you saw that message. One other take on serendipity seekers is helping people make unexpected connections. Dating app burnout is real. 79% of US Gen Z feel emotionally, mentally, or physically exhausted from dating apps. And it's one of the reasons behind the resurgence of interest in real-world events, book clubs, chess meets, bingo nights, that all promise more authentic connections. And dating apps are kind of responding to this. So in the UK, Tinder partnered with Runner, a running club, to launch a free run club. So people could join this Tinder Runner run either with a Tinder match or solo, and then they would be paired with like-minded runners based on previous running experiences. So we're starting to see, you know, dating apps kind of embrace these kind of more authentic connections. Just one other example of that for you, a very new dating app called Peak ran essentially a marketing campaign to sort of differentiate themselves to launch. What they did was they hosted a love wall in a park in Brooklyn. The idea was that a photographer snapped Polaroids of consenting passerbys. They then wrote a few details about themselves on the Polaroid, maybe their phone number, maybe their email, Snapchat handle, whatever, posted it on the wall. And then if you spotted someone you were interested in, you could either add your contact details to it or take their information. So it's just this new kind of meeting that is much more serendipitous. One final point to make here is that authenticity and vulnerability are really trending online again. We're seeing TikTok users sharing embarrassing moments and practicing something called rejection therapy, which is deliberately seeking out awkward encounters. Now, look, obviously some of this content is created with the eye to going viral, but that shouldn't take away from something deeper underneath, which is that, you know, unfiltered authenticity is increasingly aspirational. And more brands are doing more to help consumers get in touch with their emotions. So one final innovation to share with you from the shoe brand Mista. So they recently opened their first store in New York. And when they did, they included a pop-up corporate themed rage room, where people were invited to smash up the furniture, to basically get out their frustrations by breaking everything in sight. So they collected all of this furniture from around New York, stuff that was otherwise going to be trashed, otherwise be thrown away, put it into this room and said, hey, take out your frustrations on this filing cabinet. And look, this was a pop-up activation. It was in the run up to the US presidential elections. So lots of people had lots of feelings. And it was just a pop-up. But they also want to turn this into a community rage war where people are invited to write down, the things that they are enraged by in the local area, and do it in a respectful way, of course. And, my final point to end on here is that, Accenture recently released a report about, the kind of experiences that people enjoy. 42% of global consumers said their most enjoyable experience in the previous week was a physical one. 15% said it was digital. And 37%, almost 38%, I think, increasingly appreciate the joy of missing out on technology. So this trend kind of sits, almost opposite to the first three trends we have, but definitely space to consider both. So how can you differentiate by designing for surprise? How will you deliver emotional authenticity? That could mean moving beyond basic recommendations, engineering unexpectedness. We saw that from Walkcast. What about, loyalty programs that reward people for doing unexpected things, or wild card shopping recommendations or something? Typically the algorithm kind of narrows choice, but you could differentiate by designing for surprise. So there we have it. We have had 4 trends today: AI genies, MEO, sensescaping, and serendipity seekers. So that is, I think, quite enough of me talking. I'd love to hear any thoughts from you post-event. But I do have a question for you, and I'd like to know which trends you are excited to run with in 2025. So is it AI genies, MEO, sensescaping, or serendipity seekers, which is the order that we heard them in? So I'd love to, just see which trends resonated with you. And if I haven't talked for too long, hopefully we also have time for some questions, Sharon.
Yes, we actually do. And thank you guys. Thank you, Vicki. Everyone is doing the poll. Let's start with a question from Inessa. And Inessa asks about branding with AI. How can we use AI but still maintain our brand look and brand feel?
Yes, a great question. One thing I am increasingly discussing with clients and, in the Trendwatching team as well is, how to use AI and human creativity simultaneously. It's sometimes called, one of my colleagues terms it the centaur approach, like that half man, half machine type thing. So maybe there is an opportunity to kind of use AI to come up with branding ideas, to amass all of these ideas, really get everything there. And then that's when the human creativity comes in, and you then kind of put the stamp that and what you have onto it as well. So it becomes like a two-way street. It's not just a AI, it's not just AI created, basically.
Yeah, I can build on that as someone in a previous life was a brand strategist. When you create brand guidelines, usually a beautiful book about how a brand looks and feels and sounds, you can ingest that with AI. And here at Braze, we've definitely been copywriting and visuals are the 2 main places we start, where you can feed your brand voice. You can adjust it by social channel, a little more formal on LinkedIn, etc. So I definitely think experiment a bit with taking what you already have that defines your brand and letting AI extrapolate that to maintain it. So great question, and thank you. We've got a great question from Brandon. Brandon asks, is there a difference between how individuals versus brands should think about authenticity when using AI?
Oh, very interesting. I guess obviously brands have, like you just said as well, like a set of guidelines and a set of values that have been created. And so the way that there's no like one size fits all answer when it comes to using AI. We've seen some AI generated ads like get a lot of backlash, for example, over the last kind of few months. And also we just saw it, as I mentioned in the presentation, with Spotify Wrapped, some people not really liking the AI generated podcasts. Although I'm not sure whether that was because they sounded so robotic or whether because they didn't like them. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. What I was going to say is, I think it's about finding the authentic ways to use it as a brand and what feels like it's going to work for you, which will be different for every brand. And obviously, as an individual, I guess you can think about it on both a professional and a personal level. You can use AI in your professional life and in your personal life. So maybe it's also up to the individual how they want to integrate it as well.
Yes, I often joke that we're all cyborgs now. We're all half robot. You're Vicki.ai, Sharon.ai. And Brandon, it seems like a merging of that, right? It doesn't seem so distinct anymore. Emerging. People are brands now. And you can be authentic online. I think I read a study that younger generations like Gen Z don't see virtual avatars as being fake even. So heady stuff
Yeah.
here.
When I read something interesting this morning where the author, I'm sorry, I forgot where I read it, but the author was saying like, the world you are born into is just normal, So for
Yes.
like older people like me, we are like, what is this? Like AI avatars and AI Vicky, like it kind of
Yes.
creeps you out. But like younger Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like that's what they're born into. So for them, it won't be weird. Like that's just how it is, for better or for worse, to be fair. Anyway, sorry, I think you were going to ask me another question.
Exactly. No worries. I know we could talk on this for hours, but we've got one last question from Priya. And Priya asks, can B2C trends affect B2B marketing?
I think yes. Because essentially you are the person that is consuming that marketing is still a consumer. They're just a different kind of consumer. They're a B2B consumer rather than a B2C consumer. That obviously doesn't really make sense, but all that thing we talked about at the start about expectations and operating in an expectation economy, that applies to people like marketing professionals as well, who are looking for like a tool to help them put together marketing strategies or whatever. So I think absolutely yes. Maybe, obviously we just need to consider that there is kind of more of a professional angle there. So maybe, it might something more kind of fun or playful, maybe might be sort of less relevant or might need to be kind of toned down a little bit. But I would say, yes, they definitely still are relevant.
Yes. One of my favorite examples, you talked about Spotify, is when they did a B2B campaign on LinkedIn and created personalized playlists for different C-suites. And so again, I think you take a lot of inspiration from B2C for B2B. And I just wanted to I see this comment that says, you've been able to marry an avatar since 2008. Yes, virtual boyfriends, virtual spouses. And again, for elder millennials or older, it might be weird and not our reality, but very interesting how reality can shift based on all of these new trends that you presented, Vicki. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vicki, for sharing these amazing insights. Thank you again, everyone from all over the world for joining.